Okay. Well, today we're going to be talking about vitamins. So this will be a two-part series um, about the different vitamins in our body, their mechanisms, how they're used, metabolized, and what clinical presentations are there when somebody has a vitamin deficiency or they have a vitamin toxicity. So what are vitamins? Vitamins are organic compounds that we use that are important for various processes. A lot of times they are used as cofactors for enzymes, meaning that they help a chemical process occur. So we're going to talk about each of the chemical processes. A lot of times they create something for an important chemical process that can vary all the way from like metabolism to eyesight, right, to calcium reabsorption. So we'll kind of go through all of them. And we'll talk about how different vitamins are used therapeutically in medications and in medicine in general to help resolve conflict, or just not conflict, but just you know disease. I guess is the word. So we'll start with vitamin A. Vitamin A is another name for vitamin A is retinol. Vitamin A is, I don't know if you've heard the saying ever of, eat carrots is good for your eyes. It's because carrots have vitamin A in it. You can also you can also create um, vitamin A from eating meat and like organs from other animals, like a liver per se. Um, so some of the different important things to go through with vitamin A is it's fat soluble. Vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin D, and vitamin K are and vitamin E are all fat soluble. I'm pretty sure, and I think the only one that's not is vitamin C. And then all the vitamin Bs as well. So are all water. Those are all water soluble. Um, so fat soluble, which means it comes from. That means it can be emulsified in fat, and it comes, like I said, from carrots and vitamin rich meats like organs from other animals. So some of the purposes, first one we already talked about is eyesight. So retinol can be turned into 11 cis retinol, which is a really important process when light hits rods in the eyes. 11 cis retinol is used as an activator, um, which then signals to your eyes that you're seeing something. So 11 cis retinol is super important for eyesight, and specifically the rods. It also helps with gene transcription. So with gene transcription, retinoic acid um, binds to RAR or RXR receptors, which helps unwind chromatin, which opens up promoter regions to transcribe or replicate the chromatin. So chromatin's really tighten it, and then it's unwinding it right to give access to said genes. And then the last thing is cell differentiation. So oftentimes people put vitamin A on their skin. And a classic treatment for acne, which we'll talk about later, is vitamin A, a form of vitamin A. And what it does is it helps epithelial cells differentiate, um, meaning that it helps them mature and change into new specialized forms of cells. So when I say cell differentiates, it means that it's turning from a basic form to specialized form of some type of cell. So a lot of times we'll use those for skincare stuff. So yeah, it just promotes the epithelial cells, the immature epithelial cells to derive into certain things. Um, and it helps prevent something called squamous metaplasia. And squamous metaplasia is kind of a buildup of rougher squamous cells that are immature, so they haven't derived yet. And so it helps prevent it because it's deriving them. So instead of having a buildup of these immature cells, which can produce these blotches, which I'll talk about later, it will help dissipate them because it'll differentiate them into the correct cells and not have these buildup of these squamous cells. Um, so let's talk about a vitamin A deficiency. So what does that look like? So you have some ocular manifestations. So your eyes are going to have some presentations. The big one that I already kind of mentioned is something called billet spots, and billet spots are just a buildup of squamous cells on the exterior of the eye. They're these white cloudy patches that will show up on somebody's eye. And you'll also experience some retinopathy, some night blindness, and some xeropelthoma, um, which are all just different forms of eye weaknesses or vision weaknesses as well. We already talked about the billet spots, and you can also even have some squamous metaplasia in your bladder. They'll be described as on the exam or just in general as pearl-like uh, balls or spheres, and that is just clumps of cells of squamous cells building because there is no vitamin A to resolve that. So you're gonna have obviously eye problems because your rods won't be working the way they should, and you'll be having other physical presentations on your eyes and your bladder. So vitamin A toxicity, which really will only happen if there's like a bodybuilder that's consuming too much organ meat. It's like a very specific ordeal. You can also supplement vitamin A too much, and you can also um, perhaps even with some medications, um, with some medications, you can be overprescribed or overconsume vitamin A, or be more prone to overconsume vitamin A. So there's three types of vitamin toxicity: acute, chronic, and tetragenic. Acute, it would just be something like a bodybuilder, somebody just over consuming organ meat and supplementation, and they're going to experience diarrhea. They're going to experience nausea. They're going to experience vomiting, and it just kind of like just like vertigo, blurred vision. So they're going to have problems with their vision. They're going to have problems with their stomach because they're over consuming this vitamin. Chronic means that they're either they've been over consuming the vitamin toxicity for an extended period of time. So that's where you're going to experience a lot of like long-term impacts, something like alopecia, losing your hair, arthritis, even like some skin issues, right? So you that's also where you're probably going to see a lot of stuff like yeah, skin irritation and toxicity and stuff like that. And then tetragenic, which means mother to fetus. So the tetragenic response is really bad. Actually, is when you have a vitamin A toxicity, it can cause serious damage to your fetus and potentially kill the baby and have some serious developmental issues as well. So neurological developmental issues, cardiac developmental issues are the two big ones. They help form cleft palate, bunch of developmental problems. Big thing is you do not want to be consuming too much vitamin A um, as a pregnant mother. Some therapeutic uses, like the big one, like I said, is using 13 cis retinoic acid, a form of retinoic acid, which is used very commonly to treat acne. The big thing with that is it's very potent, and you don't want to make sure the patient is pregnant because if they're pregnant, it's going to, like we said previously, it's going to really damage the baby, the fetus. So you have them on something called the iPledge program, which they take two birth control medications and one birth control test or one pregnancy test to make sure that they're definitely not pregnant. So they're on birth control and they are also taking a pregnancy test because we do not want any potential developmental problems with a future fetus. Um, Vitamin A helps decrease morbidity in a lot of diseases. So in diseases like measles, you actually take vitamin A just to decrease the probability of passing away and having measles become more of an issue, which is kind of random, but yeah. So, and then the last one will be this is actually pretty cool. So there's something called acute promyelocytic leukemia, and these promyelocytes, which are a form of undeveloped white blood cells or just kind of immature white blood cells, they aren't differentiating and they start to get built up. And there's this problem with this gene. It's the PML RARA gene, and the PML RARA gene is just a gene that is it's being coded, and the way the proteins are being made within the immature white blood cell, it's preventing it to differentiate. And what happens is you have this buildup of metastasized, meaning it's moving around the body, immature red blood cells that are clumping and building, and it becomes a form of leukemia. And what's really interesting is all you have to do is take vitamin A. So it's the only cancer that we know of, and it's a super random fun fact that you can actually take a vitamin to resolve a leukemia, a form of leukemia, because what does vitamin A do? It helps differentiate immature cells into specific cells. So if you have this buildup of metastasized immature white blood cells, and then you take a vitamin A supplement, it should resolve the issue, which is pretty crazy because it'll help differentiate those cells. And it's kind of like a backlog, like a dam of built up immature white blood cells, and the dam's broken by the retinol or the vitamin A. So that's vitamin A. Now we're going to go to vitamin D, then we'll talk a little about vitamin K. These are also fat soluble. Um, so just really quickly, I didn't really talk about the mechanism actually. So let me talk about the mechanism super quickly. So we get something called B beta carotene from carrots. Excuse me. And retinol ester from meats, and that can both be turned into something called retinol, which can then get turned into retinaldehyde, which can then eventually become retinoic acid. Retinoic acid is that stuff that I was talking about that is predominantly used for cell differentiation, while the form of retinol is used in the form of cis-retinol is used for ISI. Retinoic acid is also the form that's used for gene transcription. Okay, so vitamin D, this pathway is a lot more complicated. So when people say, oh, like, I need vitamin D, I need light exposure, like I need to go see the sun, I need to go get tan. Like, what does that mean? Like, why are they referencing vitamin D? So that's what we're going to talk about really quickly. So vitamin D has nothing really, it's not made by light or anything like that. It is a compound that we can create in our body and we also consume. And what happens is it's created in our body via something called provitamin D3. And D3, D2 are the two types of vitamin D. And so first we talk about D3. So provitamin D3 is in our skin cells. And in those skin cells, it comes in contact with UV light. The UV light causes a decarboxylation reaction and causes the actual organic compound to twist and then break, and causing first it goes from provitamin D3 to previtamin D3, and then the heat separates them to form D3. And so you need light to produce about 80% of your vitamin D3, vitamin D. And only 20% will come from consuming milk, meat, and even mushrooms, which is a vitamin D2 form. That vitamin D3 form will get picked up by a VDBP, which is a vitamin D enzyme, and it helps to kind of move it through the metabolism process. So it's going to go from get picked up by the transporter of VDBP and your D2 as well. But remember, 80% is coming from the production of coming in contact with UV light and heat, and both of those will be moved to your liver, and your liver will come in contact, your vitamin D3 and your vitamin D2 will come in contact with an enzyme called 25 hydroxylase, and 25 hydroxylase will change the vitamin D3 D2 into a compound called 25 hydroxide D, and that's also called, much easier, its common name is called calcidiol. And so calcidiol, di for two, right, hydroxides, and then it'll come in contact with 1 alpha hydroxylase, the second enzyme, which will turn it into, and that happens in the kidneys and the blood, by the way. And that will turn into 25 uh, with two hydroxides, and that's its active form, and that's called calcitriol, tri for three hydroxides now. And there's two things that could happen. If you want to inactivate and go through the biliary system, you come in contact with an enzyme called CYP2481. And then if you want to activate it, use it as an active substance, it'll then travel in the blood to the kidneys, bones, and intestines. And what does vitamin D do? Why it's important is it helps with increasing bone reabsorption, or calcium reabsorption. So the amount of calcium in the bloodstream. And so it's going to go to your bones and remove calcium and increasing the bloodstream. Go to your kidneys, take out calcium out of the bloodstream, or tell your kidneys to remove more calcium from your urea or for whatever you're going to be excreting, and increasing that into the bloodstream as well. And then in your intestine, it's going to tell your intestine to absorb more calcium as you digest food. And so that is what calciferol does. And then some things that upregulate this mechanism or pathway is parathyroid hormone, because parathyroid hormone is what helps absorb um, calcium into bones, and it lowers blood calcium. And so this would upregulate the system because the uses of PTH would remove calcium from the blood, meaning we need to use more vitamin um, D to increase the amount of um, calcium in the blood. So if we have a vitamin C deficiency, we're going to have generally that's because of a decrease in UV exposure. So in countries and areas and locations in the globe where there's less sun, or someone that's just not, in coming in contact with much UV light. And that's going to have two major issues, one in babies and children, and then one in babies and adults. Generally, they test in the step one board exam, they test rickets to be basically always with kids, and then osteomalacia with adults. So rickets disease is issue with bone mineralization because we are not activating. We don't have enough vitamin D, so we are not absorbing enough calcium through the gut and through your intestines and through your kidneys, and so you don't have enough calcium. So you're going to have something like bowed legs in children, which is that their legs are literally bowing, kind of like a bow, like they're not straight up and down. They kind of come curved, and it's very sad photos. And then you also have something called like Marfan syndrome and Riddick's sign, and basically you have a lot of bone issues. I don't know how to pronounce it, but the rachitic sign or rachitic sign is where you'll see these like almost circular knobs in the rib cage, and it's kind of an outward appearance of bone malabsorption or problems with bone mineralization. Um, yeah, you have things like junoverum, which is another outward expression, and in radiographs, and you'll see similar signs as well. Basically, you're going to see really weak bones. You're also going to see signs of hypocalcemia, which means a lack of calcium, and hypocalcemia. You'll see tetany and twitching and random firing of muscles because calcium is what helps um, muscles contract, and if there's a lack of calcium, you have a hard time controlling when to contract muscles and not. And a lot of muscles won't contract, and then other muscles will just like randomly contract. And so that's tetany, which will eventually show your Trousseau symbols, which is when you use a blood cuff to basically spontaneously contract muscles to see if it's a sign, it's a form of checking if they are hypocalcemic. And then osteomalacia, which can be children and adults, but primarily tested in adults. And that will come with pathological fractures, small hairline fractures, and x-rays, and hypocalcemia, myopathy. You'll see radiolucent bones, so bones that don't look very white because there's not a lot of calcium, they're not very dense. And something called pseudofractures, which are the kind of those hairline small fractures in bones. Then we'll talk about vitamin K. That's our last one. So to recap, the last two, vitamin A is all about the eyes and gene transcription and skincare and cell differentiation, while vitamin D is all about calcium in the blood. Okay, vitamin K, that's another fat soluble. People pronounce vitamin K differently. I was just looking up to say it, but it sounds like you say it like phenamenidine or phenomenodine. And that's also fat soluble, and you can get that from fermented foods from your microbiome actually makes some, and primarily you get from leafy greens, so like kale. Um, and it goes through the system here where vitamin K is super important for clotting and coagulation of blood, and this is the cycle what happens. So vitamin K is produced and goes through a system where it comes in contact with an enzyme called VKR, vitamin K reductase, where it is turned into the active form of vitamin K, known as vitamin K hydroquinone. Vitamin K hydroquinone will then come together with any type of protein that needs to get activated first. This is the clotting cascade. It'd be factors 2, 7, 9, and 10, and it'll come in contact with 4-glutamyl carboxylase, And 4-glutamyl carboxylase will take is the enzyme that takes both the vitamin K hydroquinone and the protein that gets activated, and then activates the factors in the clotting cascade, and then turns vitamin K into vitamin K epoxide, which is the inactive form. And it'll kind of go through this constant cycle here. And so, big thing, like I said, coagulation. It's really necessary for coagulating blood and forming scabs and clots. And it also allows calcium to bind in so osteocalcin, which is the process of letting calcium bind to bone, and it helps bone reabsorb calcium. So vitamin K also plays a role in calcium reabsorption. And then MGP. So MGP is a type of protein that helps stop vascular calcification. So it's keeping that calcium getting reabsorbed into bones and not calcifying and forming in blood, which would obviously cause an issue with blood flow, which would be a big problem. Um, so with a vitamin deficiency, the big thing you're going to see is hemorrhaging, right? So bleeding, constant bleeding in your coagulation cascade, and your clotting cascade are not going to be working correctly. So you're going to see constant hemorrhaging and an increase in PTT and PTINR. And PTT, how you remember this is you play table tennis indoors. So this is your intrinsic pathway, and your INR, which is or PTINR, and you play tennis outside, so that'd be your extrinsic pathway. Both of those are going to be increased. You're going to have more increased. You're going to have less usage of your cascade, and so these values go up, which is kind of confusing because I thought they would go down, but they go up. And then, yes, you're just seeing microhemorrhaging, which can eventually form something called pectineus, petechineus, or however you say it, and that is like small bleeding dots around the cells. So there's just everything's just kind of like bleeding. And then, so that's cell deficiency or the vitamin K deficiency. Vitamin K toxicity would be shown as too much clotting is the biggest thing, and then you're going to see, and this would only be happen if like you're consuming and taking too much supplementation of vitamin K. So you're going to see your body trying to get rid of the excess blood, and so you're going to see hemolytic anemia. You're going to see hyperbilirubinemia, which is like getting rid of bilirubin, and then that can cause neurotoxicity in the brain with newborns. So it's really important to not have a vitamin K over supplementation in babies. Um, and that neurotoxicity, which can be formed from jaundice. So if you have hyperbilirubinemia, you'll likely form jaundice, and jaundice can turn into something called carinectasis, which is the neurotoxicity I was talking about. And some therapeutic uses. Obviously, we're going to need it if we're taking anticoagulants or blood thinners. The big one that they always want us to know is warfarin. Warfarin is a classic kind of old school drug that blocks this V core enzyme here, which turns your inactive vitamin K into your active vitamin K. And so that's important because if you stop the formation of inactive to active vitamin K, you can't activate the blood clot. So something like if you had AFib, which is where an atrial fibrillation, where your heart is just kind of like it's signaling incorrectly between your AV and your SA node, and so it's just kind of shaking the heart. It's not contracting how it should, and because it's just shaking, blood is standing still, which means it's more likely to be clotted. So if somebody does start to experience AFib, they will often give them warfarin or other anticoagulants so the blood doesn't clot in the heart and cause a stroke. And then, yeah, so we always give vitamin K to babies after they're born, a shot of it, just so that there's no internal hemorrhaging. And if we do find internal hemorrhaging, if the mom says no to the vitamin K shot and the baby starts to internally hemorrhage, then you need to first try to give the shot again and then give it fresh plasma. Fresh plasma has the different factors required for clotting to occur. So like 2, 7, 5, and 9 and 10. And those cofactors are really important in the clotting cascade, and so you need to give fresh plasma. That's like they emphasize that a lot, like fresh plasma, because that has those the clotting factors in them, while other forms of plasma do not. Fresh frozen plasma, so FFP. And that's it. So vitamin A, vitamin D, and vitamin K. So recap. I don't have to look at my screen. Vitamin D is so yeah, start with vitamin D. So vitamin D is activated via UV light. It's important for calcium in the blood. It increases phosphate and calcium in the blood. I think forgot to mention calcium or phosphate, and that's just super important for bone mineralization and bone reabsorption and absorption through the intestine. Vitamin A is the big I one and also helps with cell differentiation. Remember, it's your promyelocytic leukemia. It resolves that issue by differentiating immature red blood cells or promyelocytes. And then the last one, vitamin K. Vitamin K is blood clotting cascade. And so if you remember those three, D from the sun, calcium reabsorption, K for clotting, and then vitamin A for the eyes. So thanks, there's my video. And then I'll do a part two to this where we'll do more vitamins.